So here is the Amazfit GTR 2 guys, or as I like to call it, the Getter 2. And for the first time ever, there's no special reason I'm reviewing a product aside from the fact that this is brand new from Amazfit, and I bought this really out of straight curiosity. You see, I own what many deem as the predecessor to the GTR series, the Amazfit Verge from a couple years ago, and I was curious to see how much, if any, things have progressed with the GTR 2 2 years later. So if you're interested to find out what my findings are, then keep watching. And if you're not, keep watching anyway because I said so. And oh yes, one more thing. Just don't call this a smartwatch. It's a smart activity tracker. And I'll tell you why in a second after these messages. Let's do it. Alright guys, so here is the Amazfit GTR 2. So let's go over some high level specs first before we take a closer look, a much closer look at the watch itself. So there are two versions available. There's a classic, which is stainless steel and leather, as well as the sports model, which is the one we're looking at here. Now the sports version comes in three different colors too: urban gray, desert gold, and this one, midnight black. The frame width is just under 43 millimeters, which I think is a sweet spot for those of you who have narrow to wide wrists. The screen aperture is 1.39 inches across, with the panel being a 329 ppi AMOLED. And all this is protected by a layer of Gorilla Glass 3. The weight is 46 grams with the strap, and there's 4 gigabytes of onboard storage for storing music on the go, which is nice. Now, Amazfit has not disclosed what chipset or how much RAM it uses with its proprietary OS, so it's really anyone's guess. But based on history alone, where the Amazfit Verge and the first GTR had 512 megabytes of RAM, I would be inclined to think that the GTR 2 has the same based on its performance alone, and we'll talk about that in a second. But battery life is where this thing rocks, guys. Out of the factory, it's rated 14 days regular use. 14 days, guys, and 38 days in watch mode, where even the steps are still captured. Now, if you do continuous GPS tracking, it will last 2 whole days. Now, during my time with this, I managed 9.25 days of typical use, which means heart rate tracking and notifications all turn on all the time. And speaking of heart rate tracking, this watch has your usual sleep and stress monitoring, blood oxygen saturation measuring, and also has a health assessment system called the Personal Activity Intelligence, or PAI. But that being said, guys, these are all just reference tools and are really not medically approved, so bear that in mind. You can take this watch swimming or into the shower, guys, because it has 5 ATM water resistance, and there are 12 different sports modes that you can track. Now, Alexa integration. This is big. It's supposed to be supported, but it's not activated yet for some reason, but Amazfit promises it will in 2021. For what it's worth, there's NFC on board as well, but it's only useful for Alipay. So this is perfect if you're in China, but outside of that, you're kind of out of luck. So boo turds to that. And how much does all these cost? 180 bucks. Personally, I think it's a little bit steep in my book. Alright, now let's take a closer look at the watch, guys, and this thing looks good. As you can see, it feels good, and it's definitely light on my wrist at 46 grams, and I think this is down to the aluminum alloy build on the top half and mostly plastics all around here at the bottom. And some of you may be turned off by this because for 180 bucks you might be expecting something metallic, but this plastics really helps with the weight. The strap looks thinner than the rest of the competition too, so maybe that helps with the weight savings. Plastic buckle, and I wish there was a catch at the top strap right here, because as it is, when this strap is slotted in, it slides out from time to time under vigorous use. The build quality though, this thing is really nice and tight. Even though it's mostly plastics down here, the seam is really tight, guys, and the transition between the glass and the frame, my fingernails don't catch on it, so that's a really good thing. The glass is not edge to edge, but it does give you the impression of it. The screen panel though, this thing is really spot on. Amazfit, I don't know what panel they use, but it's really comparable with Samsung's. They've always been really sharp and really easy to spot or see in bright sunlight as well. Another nice thing about this watch is just how thin it is, guys. It's 9.7 millimeters at its thickest point. When you compare this with the Verge, this is 13. Look at the major difference between the two. This is more convenient because obviously, say when you're wearing a long sleeve jacket or puffy jacket, and when you want to pull the sleeve over, on a thicker watch, it's going to catch. But on this one, this just slides right under it. It's really, really convenient. In terms of controls, there are two main interfaces at play here, guys. One is of course a screen, and the other one is these two control or pusher buttons on the side here. The pushing action, I wish there was a little bit more tension, but the feedback is not bad at all. The top one handles power on off and acts as a secondary back button as well, but also as you can see when I press it, it activates what Amazfit calls apps, but I think it's more like widgets. And down here is a preset button for, in this case, out of the factory. If you press it, it launches activity tracking, but you can change this in the app as well. So using and navigating this watch is not very complicated, guys. Now, the side buttons here don't do any kind of scrolling, so everything has to be done on the screen. From the home screen, when you swipe down, you get access to quick settings like flashlight and theater mode, for example. And if you need to delve deeper into the settings, you go to the apps and it's all the way at the bottom there. Now, back at the home screen, if you swipe up one more time, you have the notification window. And this is why it's not a smartphone, guys. So bear this in mind. You cannot reply or respond or do anything, take action with any text or email. So bear that in mind. Yeah, the only thing I can do is when I hold down on it, delete that notification. Now back at the home screen, if I swipe left and right, you have access to all the different preset apps. And really this is a carousel, so I can keep swiping and you'll still come back to the home screen. If you ever get lost, you can press the back button to get back there. If you notice something, when I scroll between the screens, there's a slight jitter. You see that? So it's even worse when I have media playing or if I'm tracking an activity, it becomes much, much worse. And this is a huge difference, a contrast when I go to the apps and I scroll. See how smooth that is? And I'm not sure what's going on here, if it's an optimization issue or I go back to the lack of, just having 512 megabytes of RAM. Amazfit, maybe it's time to optimize the software or just upgrade the whole memory chipset thing. Alright, let's look at the bottom of the watch again, where on the right side you'll find the microphone port and on the flip side the speaker port. And guys, this speaker is very, very usable, say when you're playing music or answering phone calls. Yes, you can answer phone calls with this. The speakers are really usable. It's such a far cry from the one on the Verge where if I stare at it funny, it just distorts like crazy. Now on the top of that, you find the barometric sensor port, and here is the sensor array. The disc is nice and wide, so it really spreads out the weight on the watch on your wrist. The sender units are here diagonal and the receivers are there. The charging pins are right there for your included magnetic charger right here. And at the top of the bottom, you'll find the spring clips for your usual spring clips for your wrist straps. Alright guys, so here is the Zepp app, the official companion app to the GTR 2. Now, the last time we looked at the main screen was with the Power Buds video, so if you want to find out more on that, check out that video over there up in the links. But I want to focus on profile right here where we can look at what the watch can do or cannot do. Here in the connected My Devices, you can see two watches connected here, the GTR 2 and Verge. Now, you cannot use two watches if you have two Amazfit products, watches especially. You cannot use them simultaneously. One is always connected and the other one, as you can see, not connected. So just bear that in mind. But it's really easy to switch back and forth between the two. Just when you want to use it, you just hit activate it and it's boom, done. Now the battery level can be seen right there right off the bat, and also once you enter it here, you can see it at the top of the screen. Now at the top right here you see store. This is where you can access all the watch faces. It's quite a big selection. I wish it was a little bit bigger, but at least it's not glutted with hideous. Well, it's already hideous, some of them are, but at least it's not glutted with really, really bad ones. But they're pretty decent. Notifications and reminders, you can turn on and off what you want to see. Vibration, same thing. This is what kind of apps and what kind of notifications qualify for vibration from the watch. And here under heart monitoring is where you can see the meat, well, besides the activity tracking, the meat of what the GTR can do in terms of tracking your health and your heart and your sleep patterns and such like that. And down here you can even track the all-day stress monitoring and turn it on and off. And there's also right here in beta the sleep breathing quality monitoring. I don't find this very useful or accurate for that matter. Every night it gives me a perfect score for some reason, even though I know that some days like when I've been sick, I know that I haven't been breathing the same, but it gave me an excellent score nonetheless. So that's in beta at least. But other than that, this is pretty powerful. You can turn on and off a lot of things. You can change the frequency of your heart rate monitoring and such like that. So going back to the main screen, let's check out watch settings. And here you can see a whole bunch of elements that you can play with for the watch itself, like display and brightness, where you can toggle on and off the auto brightness, and also build a schedule for the always on display. Say if you're sleeping at night and you don't want to blind yourself or your significant other, this is a great way to solve that problem. Out here, you also see off-wrist lock and password right here. This is for like when you have the watch off your wrist, the watch will sense it and automatically lock the watch for safety. Wearing manner is where you can define whether you're wearing the watch on the left or the right. Downside to that, if you're wearing the watch on your right side, the buttons are always going to be on the right side, so it's harder to reach. But I read on the Amazfit website for the GTR 2 that you can flip the screen 180 degrees. But I'm wondering, just like Alexa integration, if this is not turned on yet, because I've yet to see it. And if they do turn it on, it's gonna be a super awesome feature. All right, let's back out to the main screen again. And here under app list management and shortcut cards, here's where you can rearrange the different applications and widgets on your watch itself. And app settings, you can set up, as they say right here, individual portions of the app, like phone. Yes, this thing can answer phone calls and make phone calls, so that's something you can turn on and off right here. If you don't want it, you just turn it off, but if you want it on, just toggle it again. Here is where you can upload all your music onto the watch itself and listen independently. Here is where you can set the weather, stuff like that. It's really easy. The last thing I wanted to show you guys is way down here at the bottom, called offline command words, and when you tap that, it takes you to this help page that lists a whole bunch of random command words. And you're probably wondering, like, Aaron, what is this all about? Well, I didn't mention this earlier, but the GTR 2 has one trick up its sleeve too. It can do offline voice commands. So it's separate from Alexa, Google Assistant, or whatever. You can do this with the watch itself built in. Like, you can ask it to track an activity, a specific activity. You can play or stop a media or launch an app or widget, check the weather, increase the brightness and such like that, or with your voice. I didn't find it super useful, but some of you might enjoy this once you learn the key phrases and words. And that was the big hiccup for me, because it's a whole bunch of key phrases and words that I have to relearn. It's kind of like your old school in-car navigation system that was voice activated. They always have their own kind of words that you have to learn. So it's the same in this case, but for some of you guys, this might be like a big wow factor. So guys, if you haven't heard already, I am trying to get to 5,000 subs, and only you can get me there. If you haven't already, then please consider subscribing down below and turning on the bell notification icon. So thank you in advance for your help, and get me to 5,000. Back to the program. Alright guys, now let's look at 3 of my favorite things about the GTR 2. And first one of all is battery life. And this is where Amazfit has always shined. From the Bit to the Stratus to the Verge to the GTR series and the GTS series. Those guys are like Energizer bunnies that keep on going and going. As we saw earlier, the GTR 2 can manage 10 days on regular use and up to a month on watch mode only. If you're a Wear OS user and Apple user, you can dream of getting 3 days, 2-3 days, or up to a week of battery life. So with Amazfits, if you own one of these, you don't really have any kind of range anxiety. And yes, earlier I did this instead of this, so for you hand sign finger pedants, get off your comments and keyboard right now because I just addressed it. Another thing that I really like is the simplicity of it all. From the build, which you have aluminum alloy where it's visible and plastics where it's not, it keeps things light and simple, to the design where it's monolithic, where it looks good while not being flashy at the same time, to the OS where it's not bogged down by a do-it-all mentality. So the watch as a whole is simple and light, both figuratively and literally. In case you're not seeing this guys, but it just started snowing, I'm super excited. But anyways, the last positive has to do with the screen. This thing I mentioned before with the Verge and the GTR 2, with this one, I'm not sure where Amazfit buys their panels from, but it's so strong and punchy. The colors are great, the blacks are blacks and the whites are whites. But it's a shame though, with the screen so amazing, that you can't do much with, replying to emails and such. And also the watch faces kind of suck. They look like they're designed by a 5-year-old or a designer with zero design flair. Alright guys, now let's hit the negatives. And my first beef with the watch is with the UI. While it looks good, this thing jitters and lags, especially on the main screen, like nobody's business. Especially if you have media or activity tracking happening in the background, is just really noticeable. I'm not sure what's going on there, if it's a firmware issue, but I just cannot understand it and just cannot accept it. With the Verge that's 2 years older, that thing was as smooth as butter from screen to screen. Every screen was nice. But with the GTR 2, it's like Jitter City. One thing that I worry about this watch is actually using it, because while I like the simplicity of the build, this thing I feel is a little bit too vulnerable, especially as an activity tracker, because if you expose this to a heavy environment or manhandle this, roughhouse this whole thing, the powder coating on this aluminum frame is gonna show through. It's gonna show some bare metal here. The plastics are gonna be fine, the glass is gonna be fine, but the rim itself is just gonna look hideous after a while. So bear that in mind if you're choosing this. It's a little bit vulnerable in terms of build. My last negative, guys, is pretty straightforward. This thing retails for $180, and that's not good value for money at all. If this was running $100 or maybe even $90, I wouldn't mind recommending this. But for 180 bucks, I think Amazfit is a little bit pretentious, because this is not a smartwatch, and other watches at this range, $180, proper OSs have more functionality, and they're proper smartwatches for crying out loud. But for $180, I just cannot recommend it. And I have not seen Amazfit really go on sale that much, but if you can find this for $100, $90, go for it. But at this price, I just cannot recommend it. So here are my final thoughts, guys. While the Gear 2 is a good watch and really is a solid alternative for those of you wanting out of the OS-heavy, battery-sapping smartwatch world, I have a couple of big issues with this. Firstly, is Amazfit needs to stop pushing out new models and really focus on more power under the hood. Because as it is, when I compare the older Verge with the GTR 2, performance is worse in many areas like scrolling and navigating, background data refreshes, and tracking performance. And secondly, the GTR 2 doesn't live in a vacuum. For example, the company's own BIP, in my personal opinion, was and is still one of the best value to performance ratio watches of all time. But the GTR and GTS that came after it aren't. Now, for the same price and even slightly less than that, the Fitbit Versa 2 and 3 promises more accurate activity tracking and really are, and also have Alexa integration turned on, as opposed to being promised by Amazfit. So I want to give the Amazfit GTR 2 a GearUP score of 6.5 out of 10. It's a good watch, mind you, but it really needs a major rethink on Amazfit's part. Now, some of you may actually like this watch, to which I say great, power to you, but to me, straight out of the box, this is already starting to feel obsolete. Well, there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and I'm so happy my voice lasted to these past few days of recording because I have a cold and I woke up this past few mornings just feeling funky and icky and all. But I'm so glad you guys are here. Come back next Friday for a new episode. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel. And I haven't noticed my ticker down below, but I think we're past 5,000. So thank you so much. And I'm so happy to see that number. It's really because of your help. And the next target is 10K. We're gonna get there faster, I think, this time. So remember to tell your friends and family about this channel to get us there to 10,000. And if you haven't already, also you can visit my Patreon page down here somewhere, and you can show your support there too, because I fund everything myself for this channel. So any little help would be so nice. Remember to thumbs up if you like this video too. That's super important, and comment nicely down below. I'll ban you if you have F-bombs in there. Thumbs down. Thumbs down to those of you who hate snow. That's it. Enough said. Those of you who hate snow, thumbs down. Because how can you not like that out there? Playing in the snow, building snowmen, throwing snowballs, going skiing and such, and throwing snow down each other's backs. And me, watching me, you know, testing splash tests with earbuds in the snow. I do that for you guys. That's what it's for, guys. So anyways, remember to have a good weekend, guys. I really love y'all so much, and do something nice and loving for somebody because the world needs it more than ever. And remember to mask up. God bless, and I'll see you next time, y'all.